log into the meeting.
Sorry, that's me. Hey, Ron, do you want to mute? Ron, are you able to mute yourself? Because we're hearing a lot of background noise from your computer.
Yeah. I just changed earphones. For some reason, I couldn't hear anything. So.
Oh, we weren't talking. Well, we did. We were muted.
Yeah. Okay.
Now you'll hear lots of us.
Okay. We'll start the meeting. So yeah, if anybody's listening online, it sounds like you can hear us. If you can mute your microphone until it's time to ask questions or until you have a question, that would be great. Okay, so we'll start the meeting. My name is Yev Maloff. I'm the CFO at the regional district. Been in the regional district about 3 years, and today we're going to present the budget for Kaslo and Area D, and I'll have the two directors present, introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Mayor Hewitt. Mayor Susan Hewitt, Village of Kaslo, currently serving my third term as mayor.
Area D director and 12 years as director. I don't know how many terms that is. And then 3, thank you. 7 as chair. Somewhere in there, decade of-ish.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll get the presentation started. So the agenda is we'll do a bit of overview of the regional district and our services model, talk about property assessments and their budget impact, brief look at 2025, and then we'll go in depth through about a dozen services, and then some pie charts showing the estimated taxation by area.
Sorry, here, Robert, can you shall finish down? Or yeah. Sorry, it's just setting me on one shot. All right, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So just a reminder, this is a draft budget. It's still being worked on. So last year, the finance team's still working 2024 year-end adjustments, which will affect this year's plan. And we have ongoing staff, committee, commission, director, and board level reviews. And public information sessions are in progress, this being the last one, number 9. Bit about the budget review process. So the budget compilation or the budget process of the regional district started in October, with staff starting to put budgets together and various committee and commission meetings since then. And so this is just an example of a list of some of the meetings that have been happening. So board as a whole had their first budget meeting on February 21st. And then again, committee and commission meetings have been happening, discussing budget since probably late November, discussing things like Parks, Rec, Utilities, Resource Recovery, West Transit. And then we have a couple of local service committees, Crescent A, B, and C, and Kaslo and D, discussing items like library, recreation, economic development, etc. And then directors and participants also have their own review meetings. So a bit about the regional district. It's one of 27 regional districts in BC, 11 electoral areas, 8 through K, 9 member municipalities, of which Kaslo is one, and providing 186 services of various sizes, including parks and rec, rural, fire protection, emergency management, resource recovery and waste, building inspection, planning, GIS bylaw, and transit. Key note here is each service stands on its own, has its own budget, its own taxation, its own reserve funds. So that's one of the unique differences between a regional district and municipality is regional district. We don't have a municipality, will have a reserve fund that they can move from service to service. We cannot do that, and any surplus or deficit in a service cannot be transferred to another service. So some statistics, almost 300 full-time employees, full-time equivalent employees, 280 volunteer firefighters, 62,500 residents, including the municipalities, and 22,000 square kilometers. There's a list on the presentation now, some BC provincial regulations that impact the regional district. The two main ones are the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, outlined in red there. They guide and regulate a lot of what the regional district does from a financial management perspective and setting policies and bylaws. And then the rest of the list mainly impact various operations or the regional district as a whole. Some of the key ones being the Environmental Management Act, which regulates waste, and then the Emergency and Disaster Management Act, which regulates the way the regional district delivers emergency management services. Okay, so how are annual property taxes for the regional district services calculated? And so on the left-hand side there, tax requisition amounts required to fund each service are determined through the RDCK budget process. So we go through this process. Each service has its own budget, its own taxation, and then separate from that, the BC assessment agency calculates property assessment values, and the regional district has no input in that, and also has no input on the if there's any appeals. So that's a separate process.
Hey, Ron,
Yes,
just want to let you know you're still unmuted, or you're still unmuted.
okay.
Thank you.
I can't see that icon on my screen here.
There should be on your lower left an audio button. But
Okay,
if you click on it, it'll mute you. If you take your mouse down to the lower left.
Okay, so you can hear me?
We can hear you, but we'd like you to mute if you can. Okay, thank you. Okay, so taking those two amounts comes up with a tax rate per thousand for each service. So again, that's a difference between a regional district and a municipality. Municipality will come up with an overall average tax rate for or sometimes what they call a mill rate that covers the entire municipality, whereas the regional district might have several hundred different tax rates depending on the service. And you take that tax rate for each service and multiply by the assessed value of each individual property in that service area. And you come up with the property tax for each property for each service. I will have a table that shows this a little more clearly soon. We'll talk a bit about annual assessment changes just to show what happens year over year versus the 9-year average. So the blue bars are a 1-year change year over year from 24 to 25. And as we can see, D is just above 5% year over year change. And the village of Kaslo is just under 3. And but if you look at the orange bars, which is a 9-year average, it's a much tighter distribution, maybe about a 4 or 5% difference over the 9 years. So at least for this period anyway, there's a bit of a reversion to a mean.
Hey, have I got a question for you on
Sure.
this one?
Yes.
Not sure if you can answer it, but the housing needs report that we received at the board probably 2 months ago had indicated that Area D's assessment in the last 4 years has increased by 81%.
Seems high because that would be like 20% per year. I don't know if we've seen that. So I'd want to look into that and
Okay.
confirm it.
I'll send it to you because when I
Sure.
saw your graph, I thought, oh, that doesn't align with what they had reported you. Isn't that right?
No, that it would probably have to be higher, and unless they were some other calculation or some other definition of assessment. So yeah, that's a good question.
I'll cut and copy the excerpt and send it to
Okay,
you.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the financial plan, the latest drafted financial plan is available on the RDCK website under financial statements. So there's 3 main components. One on the left-hand side of the taxation details by area and municipality. And then there's a summary page that allows us to compare all of the rural areas and municipalities, both their assessment change and average taxation change. And then there's, again, about 200 detailed service statements, which show the budget for every service at an account level, and including last year's average and the next 5 years, last year's budget and the next 5 years budget. So this is taxation details example for Area D, showing the 3 years change in assessment, the total tax requisition and rate per thousand for each of the services. So on the left-hand side, all the services are listed. They're numbered with an S. So the top half of this table above the subtotals are the services that everybody in Area D participates in. So you can tell that because the assessment value is the same for every service. And then, so that's subtotaled, and then there's an average assessment change for all of those services, or increase, which is about 13% for 2025. And then at the bottom are what we call the defined area services. So those services only define portions of Area D participates in, and that's why the assessment value is different for each one of them. So the smallest one being water utility Woodbury Creek, a fairly small assessment value. So it's a small number of properties there, and all the way up to the library, which for Area D is looks to be almost 85-90% of Area D residents participate in that service.
I got a couple of notes on this one.
Sure.
So first of all, I think everybody knows this, but not everybody, because people still ask me, even though it says Kaslo rural, this is not Kaslo's tax sheet. You'll see a separate one for that. Kaslo and D are separate jurisdictions. I think Susan and I have clarified that many times over the years, so I always take the opportunity. The other one is that the report I just put out there, which is either on Facebook or links just posted online, I go through each service and break down what 2024 was, what 2025 proposed is, what we've done to try and reduce those, why it might be going up, and what the work plan is. So anybody looking for that report, please send me a note or note it in chat and I'll send it to you. And Woodbury, those that don't have any numbers, Woodbury and the Conservation Service, they're both parcel taxes. That's why there's no numbers there, but I have those, and I know Ron from Woodbury has seen those, but we can give those to you again. And then the other two with zeros are because there's no taxation in those services. That's the feasibility service and the advisory planning. I don't tax for that one. And discretionary is also blank because I don't tax for grants.
Thank you very much. And so here's the Village of Kaslo. So these are the services, the regional district services that the Village of Kaslo property owners pay into. So a smaller list than Area D, but each one of these services, the Area D residents pay into as well. And so it shows again the change in assessment, total taxation, and then the percentage change year over year.
But there are more people checking.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
Oh, good. So here's an example of what a rural tax bill looks like. So the regional district does not actually send out tax bills or put them together. The province takes care of that for regional districts in British Columbia. So this example is from Beasley. So there is one, which is the regional district taxes are circled in red. So there'll be one line which has the bulk of the regional district taxes. And so this one says F Central Kootenay. So for Area D, it'll say D Central Kootenay. And that'll be for the services that everybody in D participates in. And then if you're living at a service, defined area service, it'll list them out separately as it does for fire here. And then the other thing this tax bill shows is the various other taxes that the province taxes you for, including school and hospital taxes. For the Village of Kaslo, I don't have an example here, but they'll have one line for the on their tax bill for regional district taxation. And then the other village taxes will be a separate item. So this is the summary page I mentioned earlier, listing out all the electoral areas and the municipalities in the regional district, showing the change in assessment with Area D about just under 5.6%, and Kaslo about 3% year over year. And then on the far right hand side, showing the net change in taxation. So 14% for Area D and just under 9% for the regional district portion of Kaslo's taxes. So 2025 overall outlook, there's a projected average tax increase for 6.5% for the regional district. So again, that really, as we saw in the last table, varies widely depending where you live. Anyway, it's lower than many other regional districts and municipalities draft financial plans that we looked at. Of course, some are lower, some are higher, and are subject to change. So the total tax requisition in the current plan is actually lower this year than we predicted it would be this year, or forecasted last year. CPI increase in staff salaries and director stipends is 3.3%. It's effectively a 2-year average, so still carrying some of those higher CPI increases from 2023. And decreasing interest rates are reducing interest charges on short-term loans, but also reducing investment income. And the regional district, one of our main initiatives is working on implementing a formal asset management plan. It's becoming, or is a requirement for many external grant streams, particularly Community Works. Community Works is a federal program that our annual funding is about $1.5 million a year. So they're part of the agreement is we have a formal asset management plan, and as part of that plan, the board approved a new asset management specialist position, which we will be recruiting for this year. So talk a bit about some challenges and opportunities. As many of you are aware, one of the main news issues right now is foreign trade, including tariffs and counter tariffs. So there's potential for this to increase procurement costs. Also, if economic activity slows, could lead to lower building permit, waste disposal, and recreation fee revenue. And of course, a more severe economic downturn could have wider effect. So we're monitoring this situation closely, following what the province is suggesting, recommending, what other municipalities are doing, having a look at our own procurement, see which ones might be at risk. And of course, the news seems to be changing every day on this, so it's really difficult to say right now what the exact effect will be. Some of that is also driving fluctuating Canadian dollar, which may also drive some increased inflation. New federal government, actually new prime minister, but also election coming sometime this year. Right now, the impact's uncertainty on the regional district. The other thing that's in the news quite a bit lately is artificial intelligence. There's a lot of hype out there on it, some of it real and some of it not so real. But the technology is evolving quickly. We're currently seeing some limited, although successful use of the regional district. We're being mindful of accuracy and privacy concerns, and also working on an AI strategy involving staff training components.
Well, you're flipping screens, just anyone that's online that maybe didn't see the message. If you have a question, feel free to just put your hand up or put it in chat or unmute. And we'll pause for questions as well anytime.
Okay, thank you. Okay, switching gears, we're going to go through the various services. So the first one is general administration. This is a service S100 that everybody, all electoral areas and municipalities pay into. So for this purposes of this presentation, both Kaslo and D participate. So this includes corporate admin, finance, IT, HR, CAO's office, and municipal directors. We're seeing an 8% taxation increase in 2025. One of the main projects is the $138,000 for roofing replacement on the Lakeside office. From an HR perspective, recruiting applicants or the number of applicants for positions is not as tight as it was a couple years ago during COVID. So we're seeing more applicants, but what's really impacting recruiting is housing availability, especially from an affordability perspective, as well as high expectation for wages and compensation. A few IT items there, migration to SharePoint, Microsoft 365, and as well as building out cybersecurity. And the board approved an organizational review process, which will commence this year.
I got a question on this one.
Mm-hmm.
The roofing replacement, we have a building reserve for that, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's not coming through taxation.
No, yes, correct. So that'll be funded from the building reserve. So this is for the south half of the roof. The north half was done, I believe, in 23.
And we had a leak last year that was pretty bad in the south. But
Oh, that was another issue.
okay, never mind.
That was a frozen sprinkler pipe.
Oh.
Burst. Okay, rural administration, service S101. So currently seeing a 25% taxation increase. So this service includes regional fire services overhead, which provides oversight and coordination for the 21 fire protection services, including 911, SPU, structural protection units, and BC wildfire service deployments and firefighter training. Most of the overhead fire service overhead costs are allocated out to the fire protection services. We're expecting almost $500,000 of UBCM grants for training again in 2025. We should know by the end of the month whether we're going to receive those. And there's some funding from reserves for a new command vehicle. The service also includes bylaw enforcement, noise, animal control, unsightly nuisance property zoning, and soil removal deposit bylaw enforcement. Key thing to note here is bylaws vary by electoral area, and that not all areas have the same bylaws. I should have mentioned this rural administration is only applicable to Area D. Kaslo is not part of it.
I got a couple notes on that one.
Sure.
So for the, just for Area D residents to know, bylaw enforcement's interesting because it's all through rural administration, but in Area D, only the noise bylaw applies. And so it's on, I believe, our work plan for corporate services to evaluate the ability to either have wall-to-wall servicing that provides these bylaws across the district or across the rural areas, or to put them into defined financial services, because we don't actually have the rest of those, like unsightly is in place, not noise, my bad. So that one's one we've been working on for a while. And part of that is just the Local Government Act is a little tricky to make those defined services. And the capacity for bylaw enforcement, we did do a dog bylaw assessment for Johnson's Landing a couple of years ago, and it was going to be $4 per thousand as an assessed rate. It was incredibly expensive. I think it was $3.50 to $4. So it's not cost effective. So that's one area where I've been working on that. And then, yeah, I have a question, but I emailed it to you before, so I don't know if you want it now. It was just around the contribution to reserve in this service. Would you rather do that one because we're not going through the sheets themselves?
We could. So the contribution to the reserve in this service is mainly driven by revenues received for SPU and BCWS deployments.
Oh, so they're not from taxation?
They're not from taxation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it was significantly high this year, but like 42,000 for every other year.
Yeah. So what's driving a lot of that is the large number of SPU and BCWS deployments we had last year. So at the February 21st budget meeting, the board reduced that total requisition, I believe, by 100,000, if I remember correctly. So rather than keeping it in the service.
So that 25% increase will go down because we did.
This includes that.
Oh,
so
okay, but the budget sheets weren't.
Yeah, so the budget sheet prior to that board meeting, I think showed a 35% increase.
Okay.
So that's already included in here.
Okay, but the budget sheets we'll see updated for the board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there'll be another draft of the financial plan will be put out later this week, probably Thursday, because we've had a number of changes that were already put in or are being suggested at this point. GIS, so both Kaslo and D participate. Service S102 provides regional mapping services, including the public web map, participates in landfill measurements and mapping for fire services and emergency services, including the mapping of evacuation alerts and orders. So on the right-hand side, I believe that's from the evacuation order for the Argenta fire from last summer. So this service is seeing a basically an inflationary 3% taxation increase, a number of initiatives underway, including strategic assessment, some upgrades to their systems and purchase some hardware. And the service is also fairly heavily involved in the upgrade to next gen 911, which is the move from basically an analog to a digital service that would 911 service that would allow the use of smartphones for texting and potentially sending pictures and those sort of things. Building inspection service S103. So again, Kaslo and D participate. 26% taxation increase. The big impact on this service last year was revenue softened considerably, 636,000 versus 950. So there was a lot of activity post-COVID or right after COVID, and that seems to be falling off. So impacting the service heavily. There was we were budgeting for a full complement of building inspection positions. There was 2 that weren't filled yet. So we removed those 2 from the budget. We won't be recruiting for them or taxing for them while permit activity remains low. And the department's stays current with revisions to the BC Building Code. And there's also some new accounting standards that may impact how we recognize revenue in this service. So planning and land use, this is Area D only. Only affects Area D. It's the rural areas. Service S104, so it's responsible for administration of zoning, land use, and development applications. Development applications are about a little more than half the workload for this department. So 18% taxation increase in 2025. Has been receiving some provincial funding to address housing regulation. Some of that work is performed by staff, so some of that the staff wages are covered by that. The staff will be working on subdivision surfacing bylaw, revising floodplain bylaw, as well as the community needs project.
I have a comment on this one. So for Area D, when you look at the green part, that's D, we have 24 unincorporated communities and only one of those has zoning. So in 2021, there was a community engagement process that met with, I think there were 6 meetings. They were all online because it was the pandemic. And I think we had one meeting, we had up to 30 participants. Out of that process, the Area D Advisory Planning Commission had determined that 5 communities were interested in moving forward to look at land use regulations. And so late 2021 to early 2022, we did move a board motion to support working on further land use regulations, which would look like zoning in those communities. So we remain on the work plan, but with all of those areas and all of that land use requirements, it'll be a while before we get to Area D. But just wanted to note that we don't have zoning in 90% of Area D, which, you know, for some areas like Duncan Island makes a lot of sense. You don't really need zoning up there, but then other areas like Allen Subdivision, Pine Ridge, Back Road, where you're really close to Kaslo, and that kind of buffer planning is something I hope we get to do someday.
Okay, thank you. So next service is S187, Central Resource Recovery. So the regional district is divided into 3 subregions for resource recovery: East, Central, and West. Central goes from Kaslo it's from Salmo through Nelson and up to Kaslo in Area D. The service captures transfer stations, recycling depots, organics composting facilities, as well as the transportation of materials. The landfill for this service is actually in the west region. So the service provides funding for the west region to provide a landfill. So this service is seeing an 8% taxation and 10% tipping fee increase. There's going to be a change to how contaminated wood waste is handled in May of this year. There's a procurement of a compacting trailer and roll-off truck and bin trailer. The Groman Recycling Depot is going to see is planning for expansion. Phase 1 of legacy landfill assessments are starting this year. So what legacy landfills are landfills that a lot of them even pre-existed the regional district, have long been closed, but the regional district is responsible for environmental assessments. So we're starting work on those. And then some assessment piloting of some new septic management options, and as well as working on rural organics diversion initiatives.
I have a note on this one too.
Yes.
So good news thing is for 10 years of advocating regarding recycling, well, we didn't get it all. Recycling is not free. I just want to make sure everybody knows recycling is not free. It's heavily subsidized by local taxation. I think it was upwards of $1 million in this service, just in the central alone. But we did advocate for years that is an unfair application to rural areas. Like Marblehead's 100% subsidized by local taxation. The Recycle BC provincial organization doesn't recognize it at all. So the rebates, we were successful in increasing those. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we weren't the only regional district that were advocating for that. I know municipalities were as well, and other RDs. So we did see a change to the rebates that increased the rebates we get on that recycling, but it's still a cost of the local taxpayer. Whereas if you're in a major urban center, I believe it's fully funded by Recycle BC.
Okay.
Is that not fully funded? You're not fully funded for Recycle BC? No, I meant more in urban, like major.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I know you guys have to do the same thing.
Okay.
And you pay for the hauling through the system.
Okay, I'll speak briefly about the two photos or pictures on this slide. So one of the key things about resource recovery waste management is doing diversion away from landfills, because landfills are really expensive, not only to operate, but to close and to monitor after closure. So we're, of course, recycling removes those products. The other initiatives the regional district has taken on is diverting organics and setting up a couple of organics facilities. One started in Creston a couple of years ago, and in Samo a couple of years ago. So that top right picture is the Samo organics composting facility. And the bottom right picture is for the Creston landfill. So that's a closure of a portion or a cell of the landfill. Fairly expensive process, requires covering the landfill with multiple layers of different soil, basically a tarp, a special or membrane, and then covering with more soil and hydro seeding. And so that's for multiple reasons. One is to keep moisture from seeping into the landfill and creating what leachate, and which can damage the groundwater, and also keeps animals and other pests out of the closed landfill. And the other thing you can't see in the picture there's perforated pipe that captures gas emissions, mainly methane, and takes them off and burns them off currently. And then you're not done then, and then for many years after that, we have to test that closed cell, which brings on a cost. So the less materials that can go into the landfill, the lower the cost of running the landfill.
Which is why we don't have landfills everywhere. Transfer stations instead. That was actually a question I had a while ago from a resident.
There we go. Okay, we'll jump into recreation and parks. So service S221 covers this for Kaslo and Area D. And so the proposed taxation increase is currently just under 5%. So 3 parks in the service. The major projects taking place at these parks are planned for these at Glacier Creek, some washroom replacements and continued campsite improvements. Lardo continued riparian improvements as well as invasive plant removal and addition of picnic tables. And Ainsworth Historical Wharf maintenance of the pathway, addition of accessible picnic tables. And from the regional park staff, 1 seasonal position was made into a full-time parks position to support all of RDCK Parks maintenance. Specific to Glacier Creek Regional Park, some work after wildfire impact, which there was an extensive impact in 2024. No extensive damage in the campground, but much of the surrounding area was affected. So over the next year, staff are working providing a secondary emergency egress road in case of fire emergency. So this slide is actually referring to initiative region-wide, so outside of 221 so this is basically working on a regional parks, trails, and water access strategy. So to identify the priorities that define future direction, philosophy, policies, and actions for both regional and community park services. So this project or initiative is slated to complete the fall of this year.
I don't know, just on the parks section, you don't have to go back, but just noting that I'm providing 100,000 in the community works. This is one area I've allocated community works for the capital work in any of the Glacier, Lardo, or Ainsworth. I think it's mostly Glacier, such as that Egress Road. I think in Lardo there was a few items too, but just the capital ones, not operations, because then we just have to repeat that somewhere else with taxation. But that'll be spread out over a few years. I believe they put 25,000 in per year when I looked at the financial plan.
Thank you. So this slide breaks out some of the budget highlights and the recreation grants that are funded through this service. So RD Community Development to fund community halls, as well as some community works to fund regional park improvements. And then the list of various grants there for recreation programs, Kaslo Arena, the reserve for the arena, and the curling rink, Argenta Community Hall, Lardo Community Hall, Ainsworth Hall, and Johnson's Landing Hall.
So there's just one correction on this one. Mm-hmm. The area D community development that is going to those hall amounts are lower than that. That's not what's going through taxation. So I know you probably didn't get that soon enough to change it. And the 13,000 for community works is for this year, whereas the 100,000 starts next year. But those hall amounts, we gave them kind of their status quo requests over the past 7 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then I'm buffering that with grants. And then I have a question out to Mayor Hewitt about the arena and doing the same, but I'll leave that one for you over email.
There does appear to be one thing missing. There's the 10,000 that normally goes in there for Kaslo Parks. The grants one is the first one. Yeah, 11.5. And there's the arena reserve.
You're right, though. There's usually 10,000 for village, including the reserve for the arena.
Yes.
Okay, so we're missing one. Yeah. Sorry, which one is that again?
It's towards parks.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a contribution.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It's in the budget.
No, I'm sure we had it in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went through it pretty closely and saw it there.
Okay, so there's also a library service, S194, seeing a 6% taxation increase, 232,000 in 2025. So we're exploring options for funding asset management for the new library building.
And just prior to this meeting, the library had their AGM,
Oh, okay.
and there were about 20 people in attendance.
Oh, nice.
Good turnout.
Yes.
Books are definitely more interesting than budget.
Yep.
Water utilities, McDonald Creek, 0% requisition and parcel tax increase. Woodbury, 4% user fee and 7% parcel tax increase. Some community works funding for installation of fire hydrants, as well as installation of a standby emergency generator.
Couple notes on that slide. Just want to note that I hopefully this year will be doing the McDonald Creek contract review. I think that's been on the list for a while.
Yeah, I think it has to be done by the end of this year.
Okay.
I think it ends.
Yeah, so it's still at 6,248 for the annual requisition. We haven't changed that, but that's all in the reserve. And then for Woodbury, I increased that to 100,000 to be able to get the generator. The hydrants themselves were around 50. So, but I think Ron knows that. Ron generated the whole hydrant proposal. So good to have you here, Ron.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, just to comment on that. I did notice that it was increased to 100, and is that a result of some anticipated costs or some projections with regards to the generator? Because I know what the numbers are for the hydrants.
Yeah, so the generator itself was, I did talk to staff, and I told them they could go up to 100,000 to include the generator. They're going to try for 80, but just to make sure they didn't have to come back to me, I said go for 100. Right. They don't apply until they know the exact, but depending on what is needed for the plant itself and what's best, that gives them flexibility to work with what's going to be most amenable for you guys.
Good. Okay.
Hydrants are 50 and generator 50. That's what I've kind of got in there.
Okay. Good.
Thanks for all your work, Ron.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll jump into emergency planning. So both Kaslo and D participate. Service S162 is specific to Kaslo and Area D. Service A101 actually captures and details out all the costs for emergency management, and then those costs are allocated out to the various areas and municipalities. So 162 is seeing a 4% taxation increase to $77,000. So one of the big initiatives or part of the work plan is continuing implementation of the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. So this means updating plans, risk assessments, creating business continuity plans, moving towards planning towards multi-jurisdictional planning, and as well as aligning bylaw policy procedures and templates, expanding the neighborhood emergency preparedness program, increasing emergency support services capacity. So that's basically if there's an event taking place, emergency support services, one of the main things they do is run evacuation centers, look after potential accommodations, and so basically taking care of people who are either under alert or being evacuated. Community emergency preparedness fund grants for the emergency operations centers and ESS. Some CBT funding for community readiness. Implementing recommendations for the 2024 post-wildfire season review. And then managing fire smart programs, including rebates, neighborhood recognition, and CWRP updates, which are both funded through the EBCM Fire Smart program. So the pictures on the right, the upper right, is our EOC center during when they were activated last year. And then the bottom right is a evacuation center that's actually, I think, out of the regional district, but it just gives an example of what goes on there. 911 communications. So the regional district is responsible for putting the contracts in place for 911 dispatch, which is out of Kelowna, and fire dispatch, which is out of Prince George. So the costs of those have increased. The service is seeing a 28% taxation increase in 2025. And the other reason for that, there was a prior surplus in 2024 of $80,000 that's no longer there. It's actually a deficit in 2025, from 24 being brought to 2025. Some increased costs continuing migration to next gen 911, and $100,000 of reserves to fund some new radio infrastructure, including repeaters.
I have a question for you on this one.
Yes.
So the user fees or the income that comes into this, is that the levies on the phone?
That's levies from the phones, yeah, that are paid to the service. And I think it's showing our budgeted decrease. There was an actual decrease last year. So those levies only apply on landlines. So more and more people move to only mobile phones or cell phones. The 911 levy or user fee decreases, or the revenue from that decreases.
And have we had any responses to our advocacy regarding, like, they don't even maintain the landlines anymore, so there's no incentive to recoup that funding, and we're having to pick up the difference?
Yes.
So do we know have you had any responses on any of the advocacy on that one? No.
Yeah, so the regional district through various channels advocates for having 911 surcharges and put on mobile phones, as do many other municipalities and districts throughout the province, but that's received very little traction.
Back on the
Okay. Kaslo D, fire protection and first responder services. So Kaslo and Village of Kaslo and Area D both participate in the Kaslo Fire Protection Service S280. So seeing an 11% taxation increase to $503,000 in 2025. The draft budget, if you were to look at it, actually shows a 17% increase. Area D is contributing $25,000 in community development, which led to that decrease. And then this increase is primarily driven by a $43,000 deficit from prior year and some increased firefighter wages.
Just a note for Susan on that one. I did tell Tristan to make sure that went to a one-time cost. Okay, so that we're not going to see a $25,000 increase automatically. So once we see that budget refined, we can ask him, we can verify that it was put to a one-time cost.
Right. I remember the discussion at our last meeting.
Okay.
About that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no worries, all good. Ainsworth Woodbury, so this is for Area D residents south of the Fire Protection District. 2% taxation increase to $28,000 in 2025. So that's for fire protection provided by Balfour Harrop. Area D Medical First Responder is a new service for 2025. So the requisition is planned requisition is $60,000 in 2025, and this provides first responder services outside of the S280 fire protection area.
The two notes on that one for Ainsworth Woodbury, it's Kaslo or Belfour Harrop that'll respond. So that 28,000 gets splits between the two fire departments.
Okay, thank you.
And it gets sent to them, and Ainsworth Woodbury's response only, which is why Ron's working on and worked so hard to get this hydrant proposal in, and he worked with the fire departments to do that. For the medical first responder service, I'm hoping we might see that number come down. I did approve a used, hey Ron, I see you, okay, one sec. I approved purchasing a used SUV through one of our fleets. So it's one of our own vehicles opposed to a brand new truck. So that it would lower the cost, and it's in good working order. So Tristan's looked at it, really good shape. So we might see that requisition go down. And then Ron has a question. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, just with regards to a suggestion. Well, first of all, we get service from both Kaslo and the Belfour Harrop departments. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
it's whoever
Okay.
can respond the quickest, I believe.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was, I thought just Belfer Harp was mentioned, but I understand that it comes from Kaslo as well. And just a suggestion, it's because I get questions every once in a while, and I was involved in the establishment of this bylaw back, I think it was around 2011. But it did go through, as it states, Area D, Ainsworth, Woodbury Fire Protection. But because we're just slightly outside of what's termed or deemed a protective area, it was now called a response. So we in a sense don't have protection, but we do have fire department response. And the reason I bring that up is that every once in a while I do get questions from the residents of mainly from Woodbury. I haven't had any from Ainsworth with respect to they're under the understanding that they're protected, and if you are protected, then you do get a break on your insurance. But if you're a response area, you don't. So I don't know if it's worth changing it to D. Ainsworth Woodbury Fire Response, or just being able to explain it. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarification. That would make sense to do that. So we'll change that slide or update that slide.
And I have questions from Ainsworth as well, and I think there were definitely, the tricky part is that insurance is what we have no control over. So already knew, like when you look at the full service for Kaslo, you're looking at $500,000 for, I think it's around probably 1,700 people in a 13-kilometer radius. So if you put that to Ainsworth Woodbury, it probably would never go through because it would be extremely expensive for your population.
Right.
There is that distinct difference, but I believe with the hydrants, you might be able to lobby your insurance brokers. And then in Ainsworth, it will not qualify, but they do have their own kind of, like, I'd call it informal brigade, and I fund their insurance on their vehicles. So insurance will never recognize that. When I moved to Meadow Creek, I tried to convince them at a massive pond, and I had a fire truck nearby, and it didn't work.
No. Yeah. For whatever reason, the brokers or the carriers, well, mainly the brokers, they just, if the key stipulation is if you're outside of that, and I think we're only a couple kilometers outside of it, but they just won't budge on that. They may, but it is worth once the hydrants get in, but it's the distance from the fire department that's the real main factor.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank God we have response. You know, at one time prior to getting involved in this, if you called 911 and they said fire, ambulance, police, and you said fire, the dispatch would have to say, "I'm sorry, we don't have a responding fire department." Whereas now we do have.
Yeah.
And we pay for it and under that local services. Yeah.
I think the Silver Ledge fire really perpetuated how could we get something in place.
Yeah. But
thanks, Ron.
Yeah, but just a comment, you know, I do get comments saying, well, it shows on my tax form that I have protection, and I have to explain. So.
Feel free to send them my way anytime.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Right, so the official service name in our budget is fire response. I just need to update the slide. Okay, and just one comment about that vehicle. I don't think it'll actually reduce requisition this year, but in future years, because there was borrowing was going to fund it this year.
Oh, okay.
Right, so
the long term is lower.
Yeah, so with over a 5-year period, it will the interest and debt servicing costs will be reduced by about at least half.
And that vehicle for now will be stationed in the Lardo Valley. So it's going to go for the Lardo Valley first responders. And we still want to be able to have one in the Ainsworth area. So that'll probably be in 2026. We'll look at that.
Okay, transit S239, Kaslo and D both pay into this. S service 239 is the largest transit service in the West Transit area. So most communities in the West pay into this. And so some region-wide initiatives for transit this year. So there was a transit value study completed in 2024 is driving a reapportionment plan. Currently, there's in the West transit area, there's 3 different transit services with various overlays and some complicated funding formulas. Some funding formulas that were put in place at a different time. So this reapportionment plan is to hopefully make that more transparent, more visible, and potentially move to a single service plan. So service level part of that in review begins in 2025 to drive potential changes in 2026. So the regional district contracts as agreement with BC Transit to provide services. That agreement basically has to be signed by July, August for the coming year. So the work that we do now we can impact this year's budget, but we can do things to impact next year's budget. And the transit year, actually, believe starts in April. So April 1 next year is any changes we do or suggest would be for April of next year. And so a fare review has also been requested by PEC Transit to look at the fares across the region and see what options and recommendations they can make. So this service is seeing a 35% taxation increase. That's driven by a couple items. Main one is that there was a $218,000 per year surplus that reduced taxation in 2024. That doesn't exist anymore. There is a transfer from reserves in 2025, which is reducing taxation this year. Otherwise, it would even be higher. So if you look at the 5-year plan, you'll see taxation jump again by at least $180,000 in the coming years. And there's also an operating cost increase from the agreement with BC Transit.
I have some comments on this one. So for residents of Area D, this is one I very much struggle with, not because transit isn't ideal, but because it's one of the most difficult services to provide in rural areas. It's close to $60,000 for Area D for 1 day a week. And now that gets to Kaslo as well. And there's other connections and you connect up to the 99. When you look at the 5-year plan, it increases significantly with no known changes for servicing. So it is one that I struggle with every year. I know that the website and accessing the actual schedule is a part of the problem. So I think fixing that will hopefully help. I do want to look at the reapportionment plan to see if that changes, what it costs Area D. And then the fare review as well. Currently, I think what we bring in fares is significantly low compared to the cost, which is normal for transit. It's to be affordable for everyone, but it does mean in rural areas, it's not environmentally friendly to have a bus going up and down a lake with 2 to 3 people on it. So how we address that, I'm not sure, but it is one that I'm constantly looking for to see increased efficiencies that might not be achievable just based on our rural area. So it is one I have posed in my report to give you feedback on. Feel free to email it to me. And again, going through the processes that are outlined in this slide are ones that reapportionment is one I'm very much looking forward to. I could see it changing for Kaslo as well at that realm. So stay tuned for this one, and please send me feedback by email if you use the bus, if you like the bus, if you have a hard time using it, anything like that. I have a hard time with this one.
What would get you on the bus?
Yeah. So I believe the next West Transit Committee meeting is in April. Or I don't know if it's the data set or not. So if anybody's really interested in those transit discussions and the challenges in transit for this area, I would look for that meeting. It's either going to be in April or May.
We have a workshop in April to go
is that
through
a
the
workshop?
values
Okay.
report. But then I believe, aren't you the chair of that committee? No, you're not. I'm sorry, you were last year.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's June. We have our next.
Is June the
meeting.
next public meeting? Okay.
Yeah, but April's the workshop on the values study
Okay.
that was done.
Okay, we're gonna jump into the pie charts. So these charts basically break out in graphical form where each area's taxation goes. So on the left-hand side, there's a little table that says 200 per $250,000 a home value. That's what your tax bill is. And of course, there's not many, if any, homes for 250, but your home's worth 500 multiplied by 2, 750 by 3, and so on. So this first slide is for property owners in the village of Kaslo for their regional district portion of their bill. So 4 fairly large services make up probably 85-90% of the bill. So that's fire protection, refuse disposal, the parks and rec service, and then the library. I should mention before we finish that this presentation will be available on the web page for this meeting. So if you go to the calendar, this presentation will be available hopefully by tomorrow afternoon on the web page for the calendar event for this meeting.
Will that be the one with this few small updates that you're?
I'm going to try and make some of these updates to for those changes. Yeah. Okay. So Meadow Creek tax bill, and so no fire protection, so mosquito control, almost half the bill, refuse, and the parks and rec making up between those three about 75% of the tax bill, and then the rest being smaller amounts.
I have a couple on this one. So is this mosquito control left at what was in the initial budget? It was 83,000.
If that was the number on February 25th, then yes.
Okay, so that's gone down by 13,000. Or sorry, it's gone down to 73,000 for 2025. So that'll be a bit smaller. I do, and I provided an outline of why in my report, but historically, because of Duncan Dam, community development funds have been used to subsidize this service. It's one of the most expensive services across the whole RD based on the geography. It's extremely large with few people, so it's an expensive service. When you look at Pine Ridge, like mosquito service for Lardo Valley is roughly about 110,000. Pine Ridge is 13,000. And the issue with Lardo Valley and why I've continued the subsidizing of the service, which was started before me, is because with Duncan Dam operations and then freshet, that can drastically alter the requirement for treatments. And we've been working with BC Hydro to really make sure that our staff are in the loop, or our contractors in the loop, to pre-plan as much as possible. But there's a whole decade of history on what they're doing there. So that's why that one's subsidized. And the only other thing in this one is that I did note discretionary grants are noted. We don't do those in Area D. You see is in all the Area D ones. So there's no funding for those two.
Yeah.
But they're just listed on the chart.
Yeah, I think that sliver is a 0.
Yeah, the summary is 0 too. So just making sure. I mean, there's small amounts anyways, but I'm really clear about not taxing for grant, but I have community development. So thank you.
Other thing I'm wondering is why you used a $250,000 home value, because it is like, that's not even our average anymore. I don't.
No, that's just so
Probably double
people
that.
can do the math,
Right.
right? So it's that way. If it's your home's worth 750 multiplied by 3, we get asked, why don't you use an average? Why don't you use 100,000? Why don't you? So this is what we've just chosen to do, but we'll certainly open to using something else if it makes more sense.
My Kaslo house is only 383, but once your house is done, it might be more. It's a beautiful house.
Yeah. So Pine Ridge, no fire protection, but
there is fire protection and yeah.
There is?
Yes.
And how come it's not on this?
It
Hi.
goes to Fletcher Falls
Oh, I
and
see.
north to Cowan Road.
Okay.
It'd probably be about at least a third of that.
Okay, so this one needs to be updated. Thank you. So area D with no mosquito or fire protection. Tax or RDCK tax bills, so waste disposal, parks and rec make up half the tax bill, and the rest divided between various region-wide services, building inspection, bylaw, rural admin, general admin, and as well as the regional West Transit service.
So this would apply to pretty much just Cowan Road to Lardo, which is not many homes, because once you go south, you would have the Woodbury Ainsworth fire in there. There are a few. Bobby Farm is in there. You know everybody's house, right? When I say Bobby Farm, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know which one.
I know, you know.
So Ainsworth tax bill with that fire response, as we've been corrected, for Ainsworth, Woodbury, paying into Parks and Rec and refuse disposal. And again, a slew of some smaller services.
And sorry, I forgot, north of Cowan Road would include Schroeder Creek. That would be the biggest community in that last slide.
I didn't notice, can you go back to that one, if library was included? I can't remember.
Oh, you're right, library would be in that one.
Yeah,
Is it?
Yeah, library goes all the way to, the only communities not in it is Meadow Creek and North. And Cooper Creek, sorry, Cooper Creek, Meadow Creek, but Lardo, Argenta, and Johnson's Landing, I believe, are in the library service.
Okay.
And it covers the whole south area. Yeah, it's just north of Cooper Creek that it's not in.
so then on the Ainsworth slide, it should also be included.
Yes, it should also be on the first slide.
Which
It was the one you were on, the next one, yeah.
oh.
This one's Ainsworth, yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, I'm going faster than that. And I don't see it there.
No.
Okay.
These are just for your visuals that won't
Mhm.
change any of the
Yeah.
taxation numbers.
No.
But it does help to visualize.
Yeah.
So somebody area D with protection from Kaslo fire department, about 40% or 35% of the tax bill is fire protection, refuse, and rec and parks making up another 40% of that.
Library should be on that one.
Yeah,
too.
it seems the library is the
I don't think library is not in any of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's get that library back in there.
And if you're in Pine Ridge and the fire service, you'd have the mosquito service as well.
Yes.
Endless pie chart.
And that's the end of the presentation. So any other questions from anybody online?
I'm watching to see if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question.
How do I wave my hand here?
Oh, hi, Bill. Yeah,
Bill,
you're on.
Yeah, two things. Is it conceivable to have a smaller vehicle for that bus run?
So yeah, I saw that and I did get back to you, Bill. They already used the community size bus to come
No.
up the lake. They don't use the large bus.
I was thinking like an SUV or something.
Oh, I don't know that BC Transit has, like, BC Transit provides the vehicles, we pay for them. I don't think BC Transit has anything smaller than the community bus size,
Do
but
they
it's a
have
good question.
any electric vehicles?
They're working on an electric vehicle plan. I'm not sure where they're at with it, but I know that that's going to increase the capital expenses until it levies out.
The other issue with electric vehicles is charging time. So once, especially on the longer routes, if they run out of juice, they can be taken out of commission for quite a while. So they're a lot more difficult to plan and integrate into a service on longer rural routes.
Okay, another subject. I'm not quite clear how far south the fire service from Kaslo goes. Does it go to past Fletcher Creek, or does it go to Ainsworth?
No, it goes to
Does it go to Woodbury?
Twin Bays Road.
Twin Bays Road. Okay.
And then Woodbury and Ainsworth have a response only service. They don't have full protection. So they have a separate service.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I see Carl's unmuted. Hey, Carl.
I have a question. This is Carl from Argenta. Under the emergency communications, is there an allowance for assistance to the ham radio club to get the repeater on Lavina operational again?
We're funding that through CBT. So the tax service wouldn't do that. The 911 service is specific to dispatch for 911, but the ham radio for Lavina is being funded through CBT, and I'm going to provide a community development grant for anything missing on that. So that'll get refurbished.
Okay.
Are you still there, Carl? Yeah.
Thank you. There was a missing link around here.
Yeah, we'll get that one funded. I think CBT and Links are working on that right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Any other questions?
I'd like to ask one. Am I even here?
Oh, we can barely hear you, Larry. Do you want to speak up?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, that's
Yep.
better.
Okay, with Lardo, a couple of questions. I don't know. I mean, with the library thing, there's only maybe 18 residents here all year round, except for the summertime part-times with 65 properties. And we're getting a tax for the library. I don't know of anybody that even uses the library here. I'm not certain though. And the other thing is the mosquito thing. Last year, the last couple of years, that I mean, when I retired at 65, my taxes were down to $100 a year because of all the grants and stuff. And now I'm at $273 because of the mosquito thing alone. And so, and in those 9 years that I've been retired, my pensions haven't gone up. So it's almost like everything's trying to draw us seniors into a position where we have to sell our homes almost to try and live.
So I'm going to answer both your questions, Larry. First, I'll do the mosquito one. So the mosquito service is, I'm only increasing that by a maximum $2,000 a year, and I'm using community development to keep it subsidized. The increase that's happening that you're seeing is that the grants the province provides to seniors and homeowners is not increasing at the same level of CPI or taxation needs. And so there's a bigger gap occurring between that grant and what actual taxation is. I can send you the mosquito budget and I can show you where it's increased. I'd say over the past 10 years, it's been, when I came in, it was about 62 and it's at 73 this year. So it's only been 10,000 in 10 years. And I'm using grants for the rest of it. On the library, we can definitely ask the library for stats. They do keep stats by community, I believe. For a community to leave a service, they would have to petition the regional district, and then we would have to go through the same process that initiated the service, which I believe for the library was a referendum or an AAP process. So if a community wants to get out of a service, that's always an option. It does take at least a year or two to do that process. Did you get that, Larry? We can't hear you if you're speaking.
They vote each year whether they want mosquito, or is that just continued as a 5-year or 10-year agenda, or?
Once you're in a service, it's perpetual. The only way to end a service is to do as I just said, which is the public has to petition. I request a petition because a referendum is actually $12,000 minimum and AEP is about 5,000. So before we go through that whole thing, I want to know, like, do we have a significant amount of people that want to do this? So generally you petition the local government to say these amount of residents don't want to be in a service anymore. And then you would do the formal local government process to assess that. And with mosquito, it's the only thing that changes every year and that we discuss every year for changes is the budget process. But once a service is in, it's in.
The people generally are happy with it.
Generally
upping their taxes quite a bit.
For definitely for mosquito, they're generally not, like, I've heard 1 or 2 people that don't like the service because they use BTI. It does have a pest management plan. They're actually switching to organic BTI this year. And they're switching from helicopters to drones so that they can be very specific. The flooding areas is where a lot of that money gets spent because you can't access them or you need a helicopter. And heli flights were 7,000 to 12,000 per. So they're changing how they do that to keep it at where it's at now. They also bulk buy the BTI and they run the program in several other RDs. It's Morrow Bioscience. In terms of the taxation, I've maintained subsidizing this one service, whereas where I use my grants every year depends on what's happening. Like the 25,000 of fire was just this year, whereas the Lardo Valley one, because it's always been too expensive based on geography and the people, it always had funding. The grants I have are actually what are called, and any of the community development grants any of our jurisdictions have are called PILTs, payments in lieu of taxation. So we get those from the province because the province doesn't charge crown agencies like BC Hydro taxes. So the initial thought when that program went in was that those grants would be used for that service to subsidize it, which is a direct attribution to the actual operations of the dam. It's the one that I keep the lowest in terms of increases. It's 1,000 to 2,000 a year max. And what's in there right now, unfortunately, is what was proposed. That would have been the increase without the grant. So it doesn't reflect that. It's actually lower than what's in here.
Well, all I know is on the 2 years. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Larry.
All I know is in 2 years, I saw in 1 year it said 100 and the next one was 73 for the mosquito. Right on the paper it said that. Just didn't make sense.
Sorry. So your assessment change would change, but the budget itself last year was 72 and I increased it to 73 this year. The total budget is 110. So that difference is what I'm putting a grant in for.
Okay, well, be interesting to see what my assessment says this year.
Assessments, Lardo, definitely. I think not last year, a couple years ago, 5 to 6 of you challenged the assessments in Lardo, which was a really important thing to do because you were looking at a 40% increase for the whole community, I think based on one cell. So when you guys do challenge those, especially as a community, it makes a big difference. It's definitely a problem. Assessments we have no control over. And when you look at the non-market to the market, it really is housing price sales that is significantly impacting that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll send you the mosquito budget, Larry. I'm sure you'd love to see it.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Amy.
No problem. Any other questions? I might as well tell you, Angela, I don't know if you still have property in Johnson's Landing, but I did include in the budget this year a grant. It's not in taxation, but a grant to review the hazard assessment that was done post the slide in 2012 because the Ministry of Forest monitors it every year. Yeah, so you get those mailed to you. The hazard assessment that we were told to put in place post the slide that geotech assessment was originally done by the province. And so I've asked to have that updated because the reports from MOF, Ministry of Forests, were showing that there's been no movement for a couple of years.
20 minutes after the slide, there was no movement.
Yeah,
But they kept the hike going for 2.5 years. Oh, will it happen any moment?
yeah,
But that was the one time where the bog got bogged down and it just, it was just too much rain for too long. And that barrier that was holding the water in place is gone.
yeah, the berm. Yeah.
And it pulled all the way from the hillside. You can see Gap Trail on the mountainside if you hike up there where it pulled that hard when the release happened. But that'll never happen again for another 100,000 years.
Yeah.
So those reports and all the money you spend on it is like, save the Maitland. That would be my, we don't need it. It's not moving.
So that's why I want to get the reassessment done, because all we have is that annual monitoring. So Ministry of Forest does all that. We just mail them. It's really good to hear that feedback. The bigger concern was that all of your services got cut off, such as they moved the post office to the south end.
Right.
YRB doing road clearance in the winter with the landlines down and the hydro lines down got super messy because they compound that with the high hazard. There is still 800,000 cubic meters of material above the landing, but given the scarp itself hasn't moved, that's where, so I put a grant aside for that. That won't be through taxation, and we'll work with the Ministry of Forest on how can we get this reassessed, because the reports are showing there's no movement. So can we take this off, which would be a huge, also not just for your servicing, which you don't have a lot of, but what you do have is important. But then insurance hopefully wouldn't be so affected by it, because I know that got really tricky too.
Government. Yes. They talked about it for way too long. They scared everybody off for long, it's gonna move any moment, it's gonna move any moment. And it, like I say, 20 minutes after the second one, because the first one was minor. And then the second one dumped everything that was up there, and there's nothing left. And anybody walk up there, you can see. And I talked to the geo guys,
Yeah.
said, you can see it, it's done. It was a one-time event for another 100,000 years. So keep monitoring it for that long doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And that's, we'll keep you posted on that, but I put 10,000 aside, and then if it's more than that, I'll figure out some grant applications or ask the province to redo it, ideally.
Now I have a question, not part of this, but when I got my hydro bill from Fortis for the new bill that I'm doing, they gave me two numbers. So the house is 320C and the apartment is like 335. I don't know wherever that is, but they gave me this weird apartment number for it. And I called somebody and they said, you got to go to the RDCK because they're the ones who have to tell Kaslo what the number is. So I'm wondering, who do I need to phone? Because as far as I'm concerned, the apartment is on 320B and the house is on 320C.
Yeah.
Because the only entrance to the apartment is on the back lane. There's nothing to the front lane.
Yeah.
So I would like to get it listed as 320B or B lane
Oh, okay, yeah.
instead of this 332, which, I don't know where the postman's ever going to find anything if anybody lives in that apartment with that weird address. But they said that you got to phone the RDCK because they're going to tell the city what the new number is. So who would I phone to make that request to find how to change the address?
I believe it's the building department. Because they're the ones, once you get a building permit, that initiates, especially if you have a new address, that initiates the number. But you may want to just, if you can, send an email through to the village of Kaslo and ask them, because they would have the building department contact on that. Like the permit itself is through the village of Kaslo contracted to the RD. So you could call the RD, but they might just redirect you to the village.
But it's Fortis who needs to get told so that the Fortis bill will come and be found. Can I change it like the 320B or is that just too weird?
If the number has been allotted to you, then you have to Yeah,
We
yeah.
should have two numbers.
Right,
But
but it's both of the
320
numbers. No, I get that. Yeah, if you've been given the both numbers,
No,
yeah.
we got this 332, C Avenue, which is, I don't walk to try to find it, but that would be, 2 blocks away. So that doesn't make any sense, and Ford doesn't. And I'm just thinking of Mayo, if somebody rents in there, it should, or someone comes knocking at their door, so.
Right.
Anyway, they just said, oh, phone RDCK, so yeah, I could phone the building department, but we need to just get a proper number. Wondering who I am to ask.
You can try and call the building department.
Start the building department if they
Yeah.
don't. You're gonna be building, planning, or maybe even GIS, because GIS where's the property? It's outside?
It's in the village.
Oh, it's in the village, so that's different, yeah. Because GIS does address updates, but they're not the ones who assign them. But I would start with building. I would start with building.
Building department.
Yeah.
You can just call do you have the phone number for the ERD and just ask for the building department?
Oh, I know who's there.
Okay, you can find it. Okay.
I just haven't done it, and then I thought, oh, you guys, you're maybe able to know that. We need a new number.
Last call for questions online. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending
Yeah, thank you.
this evening, and everyone online for listening in and for your questions.
I just want to note the timeline in terms of when we approve this. It is at our March board meeting, which is March 21st. 20th, thank you. So I posted my report in the chat as well. Lardo Valley links posted on their website, so it's way easier to read than on Facebook. I'm sorry that Facebook post probably turned a lot of people off from reading it. But I do have questions in there to the public, and also I break it down. So if you have input, please do send it. And if you could do that this week, that would be great. And then I've already posed a bunch of questions to Yev has so many questions sitting in his email right now. So please send us input if you'd like to. Thanks. And my report's only area D. I don't even as of yesterday, I had to clarify to someone that I'm not Kaslo. So you are Kaslo.
Okay, thank you everyone, and
Thank you.
have a nice evening.
Good night.